Okay, hello and welcome everybody for this keynote on what it takes to achieve production excellence. And we have two amazing folks who live in the future, and we're really thrilled about them coming here and sharing how they see things shaping out in the industry. So please go ahead and introduce yourself. Let's start with the Charity.
Hi, my name is Charity Majors. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Honeycomb.io.
And I'm James Governor. I guess I'm co-founder of a research company called RedMonk.
Great. Thank you both for being here. So I'm going to start first with the Continuous Delivery Foundation, and we want to help people get better at delivering software. And Charity, lately you've been sharing lots of views on that. So what would you say is sort of your idealized vision of CI and CD that teams should aspire to?
Whenever you write some code, within a few minutes, it should be in production. Without any manual stuff, without any gates, without any without a long period of time. It should be bundled up so that you have a single artifact per developer's merge set, and it just automatically goes live, so that you can basically keep one window open with your IDE, right, as you're writing a code, and another window open with your observability tool, and you're instrumenting as you write your code with the eye to your future self. How am I going to know if this is working or not, right? And then you merge, it gets published, and then you look at it and you ask, is it doing what I expected it to do? Does anything else look weird? And then you go along with your day.
And I know lots of people will kind of raise things that prevent them from doing this, because we know in practice we have data and it looks like only 10% of folks are in that ability. Do you think it's something like everyone should aspire to, or maybe just folks who are in specific industries?
I think that there are some industries where this is made more difficult than others, but I don't think that should be used as an excuse not to try. I think that it should be used as this is the ideal. Now, if you have regulatory things, or if you have if you're a mobile developer and you can't just publish automatically to Apple's iTunes every few minutes, look for ways that you can approximate it. If you have like an internal version of your iTunes app that you can just publish to automatically, so that your internal users are using it automatically, or if you have whatever it is, the key is to get real users using it in as short of a time as possible. And I didn't mention code review in there. Code review is absolutely important, but in my mind, that counts. That's outside of that loop, right? You have the code review conversation. You go back and forth, and then as soon as you're ready to merge, that's when the timer starts. And it should be like 15 minutes or less. And the reason for this is that if it gets to be like an hour or two or more, you're going to start munging together multiple developers' changes and shipping them in a single artifact, right? And as soon as you've done that, you have decoupled, you've like blown apart the entire software ownership ideal. If your code is going to be live within 10 or 15 minutes, you're going to go look at it. It's going to be muscle memory, right? It's reasonable to ask developers to do that. If you know that your code is going to be probably live at some point in the next 6 to 24 hours, along with 1 to 10 other developers, you're never going to go look at it. Like, why would you? Like, it's going to be bunched together with a whole bunch of other developers' changes, and therefore there's no point in holding people to that sort of a thing.
Great. And I'd be interested for our audience joining in the chat. If you are already achieving this, please go ahead and say so.
That a lot of people talk about this like it's like this impossible ideal, like it's only the best of the best who can do this, when actually this is the easy way to write code, right? Is when you can see what's happening, and when you've just written it, what you're trying to do, what trade-offs you made, know what the variables are named. It gets harder and harder the longer that interval is, and it gets harder and harder the more changes you're bunching up at once. The way people are doing it now is the hard way. This is the easy way. This is the easier way, and the way to ship faster with fewer bugs and easier.
And James, would you agree that it's something everyone should aspire to?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the issue is that there are a set of associated disciplines in order to be able to do this stuff. So, you don't, you're not an organization that, on Friday is afraid to ship anything before the weekend. Right. And then on Monday, you're an organization that is going to be like, oh, now we're ready. And in fact, we are going to ship this Friday. the set of things that you need to do, and I think this gets, as we begin to talk about what production excellence might be, is it's a set of interrelated disciplines. And, you have to have a really strong test culture in order to have the confidence to do this kind of stuff. If you're going to be in a position where, you're going to deploy, look what's happening. You're in an environment where you've got an amazing test suite. You've done a whole range of different kinds of tests. And I think that that's, very important. Obviously, are you an organization that do you have the staff to do it? I mean, Charity is saying that's the easy way, but of course, people that are able to, build and manage their systems, you need to make sure that they fully understand the domains in which they're working. Not every organization is set up in that way. So I think that there, look, we're talking about, as Charity's pointing out, keep the changes small and make a lot of them, rather than, we certainly as an industry, historically have been making rather larger changes, and having a culture where you've understood the value of breaking things up into small pieces and those workflows. These are a lot of different things that need to be done, and a lot of organizations aren't ready there. I mean, automation, how strong is your automation across the board? I mean,
your build tooling, your build pipeline, your CI/CD pipeline, like all that stuff.
The pipeline. There are people still out there doing manual builds. So clearly, for them, this is probably not the first step they need.
Right.
But so there are a lot, is your route in through automation? Is it through rethinking, how you're going to observe and look at the systems? Are we frankly doing agile development? Are we using tests effectively? I think, as I say, that to me, it's the good news is it's achievable. The bad news is sometimes people, as to your point, don't know where to start. But the truth is, you need to do a lot of things.
Yeah, this is where, when we were coming up with the observability maturity model, like this, which is kind of, it's a little bit unlike other maturity models that I've read. And we tried to focus in on, you should be able to recognize yourself and the pathologies that you're dealing with, right? Is lack of tests? Is it, lack of instrumentation? Is it, you should be able to recognize yourself and then start with that, right? Start with that. And then, address it in the ways that we tried to lay out which steps that you need to get better in each case. So it's kind of like a choose your own adventure of how is my organization broken? That way, let's start there, right? And, James is absolutely right. You can't just jump to the end, although in some ways you kind of can, in that, when you're starting out fresh, that's the best time to just start, build your CI/CD pipeline and have it auto deploy. Because if you grow up that way, you don't have to go over that huge hump of digging yourself out of all that technical debt to achieve that. If everybody grows up with those assumptions, it's a lot easier.
So it's like the tree thing. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. And of course, there are different teams working on different things. So you might have one team, you got banks, they got, 400 million lines of Java code, and they don't know what's in there. And, the logs suck, and, it's really, it's not ready to be in that kind of world. But perhaps the people that are building the mobile app are going to come at this or the web app are going to come at this from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's one of the things when we think about maturity, and you're 10% of folks say they're doing this. One of the questions I'm always interested in is almost any large company that I talk to has pockets where they are able to your point, live in the future. They're showing a future state. And very often that's, as I say, it's been sort of mobile web development. Because I think that's one of the other things I didn't even mention, like test coverage across these old apps. That's a whole sort of question in its own right. So not all the code bases might be ready to be treated like this. But Charity's point, for a new application build out, maybe that's the time to be okay, let's try and really establish best practice here.
One of the key things is, like I said, is not decoupling that software ownership. You want to have ownership over your changes. Another change that goes along with this, almost in lockstep, is decoupling releases from deploys, making it so that you can deploy constantly, but you can release software through a different process, right? Using feature flags or whatever.
That's what
exactly.
I'm talking about. Now I'm excited.
You have to. You have to, because go ahead.
Yeah, it's just, being able to do a dark launch, to be able to look at a system in production, but then you're not actually turning it on for the user, and then you can do that to manage cohorts. That's, I think, a really exciting idea. And definitely, I mean, Charity, well, for obvious reasons, thinks that observability is rather important in any of the things we're talking about. But definitely, if you want to do progressive delivery, you absolutely need to be thinking about it from an observability first perspective. So I'm wholly, deploying some, and one of the things that will prevent anything from happening in IT is business freaking out and being like, wait, we're not comfortable with that. And so the idea that you can not get in the way of developers and allow them to work in the way that Charity is talking about, but then the business is deciding when the service is activated, particular user or set of users, that's a really profoundly sort of impactful step forward. And that's one of the things I think, it's just that the fact that we've got this cloud abundance, we can do it now.
It's so true. And you don't even, like, when you're using feature flags, you don't even have to think about the speed of your deploy. You just flip it on, flip it off, flip it on, flip it off. Like it's a really great way to make your business partners feel a lot more comfortable with all these somewhat radical changes.
That was I do. Because when I first started talking about progressive delivery, and I thought it would be like, nerds that were like, oh, I can see that. But when I started talking to CIOs, and they were like, oh, this is about de-risking. It was kind of a profound moment, because if you can have flow and the business is comfortable, that's a great thing.
That's magic. Absolutely. And I do think that it's important to point out that a lot of this cutting edge stuff that we're doing, and this is all in the last 5 years, right? That these companies that have kind of emerged from the Facebooks and Googles, and we're springing up like locusts everywhere, just there's a better way to build software, and you can kind of now chain together a pipeline out of tools you can buy off the shelf, like Honeycomb and Launch Darkly, which is super cool. I feel like the gravitational center is moving finally away from pre-production to actual production software, which is where it needs to be all along. But I do feel like encouraging people to do all these fancy things around deploys and stuff without putting equally as much focus on observability is just going to set people up for terror and failure. Because if you can deploy a small change, whatever, or deploy a bunch of stuff dark launched, but then when something goes wrong, you actually have no idea what's going wrong, and you can't compare diff over diff. You can't compare change over change. You can't see exactly what is happening. You can't even pinpoint like in the traditional metrics world. You might see a spike of errors, but then you have to jump into a logs world and try and visually correlate to figure out if it's the same problems. You actually need real observability, which is comes down to these arbitrarily wide structured data blobs, spans. If it's not built on those, it's not observability for now. And that's what really helps you put your glasses on as you're driving down the road and needing to look, because you need to be very user oriented in your telemetry, right? It's not enough to just be able to see if there's a spike. You have to be able to see exactly which users and why this error spike is for.
Great. I'm super happy to listen, and loving everything that's coming out. But let's work in the title now, production excellence. So what is production excellence, and why is it something we need to kind of make people aware of or think about?
Well, I would say it's like a constellation of all these things that James and I have just been talking about. It's the whole burrito. It's thinking about it from the perspective of the user who's eating the burrito first, right? It's not thinking about, well, we need to do progressive delivery because that's what James and Charity say, and it's cool on Hackers News this week. But it's like, okay, where are we hurting, and where do we need to apply these techniques and tools most?
And why the focus on production as opposed to, let's say, development?
Because that's where the rubber meets the road. You can write code in a bubble and it can be as beautiful and as logical and all the tests can pass. But until you've combined it with real users on real infrastructure right now, you don't actually know what you've got.
And what what are some of the elements so production excellence, that's observability, pulling in progressive delivery techniques, anything else people should consider?
Well, I think that the testing and automation, we sort of spoke a bit about that as I think we may have secretly slid in this notion of production excellence, like in what we were talking about, that it is a set of associated disciplines. And frankly, a really good focus. I just can't sort of iterate enough on the idea that testing and automation, that's something to invest heavily in.
They're liberating.
And what the other thing I think that and this is maybe something for the Continuous Delivery Foundation, certainly one of the patterns that I'm now seeing, and it's one thing, Charity talks about, okay, observability, you need to, but we are definitely seeing a merging of pipelines and observability, and the pipeline should be absolutely something that you are instrumented as a production system, because you're talking about it being the heart of that rubber meeting the road. So I think that some of the really interesting stories that I've seen in talking to leading organizations recently have been about that, where the pipelines and observability are coming together in really interesting ways and helping to make organizations more effective. Because here's the thing, if we say, 10% of orgs could do this, what if it was only 5 or whatever? It doesn't really matter, but how do we get people to do things? I think that you've got to have great tools. Everyone's like, oh, DevOps, it's not tools. Well, there were some tools that pushed us forward in order to be able to do what is now described as DevOps. So, if we think about, Andrew Clay Schaefer and Patrick coming up with the term DevOps, and I don't think it's any accident that then Andrew's going and building configuration automation platforms, right? And so at any given time in tech, we're understanding a working set of working practices and building tools that will enable us to do those practices, and then hopefully more people will be able to use them. So it's hard to do observability in the way that Charity is advocating if you're running around trying to look, oh my God, I'm looking at this log management system now. Now I'm looking at my metrics, and my hair is on fire. I'm trying to look at what about it's microservices and distributed traces, like putting everything together in a way that is meaningful to the practitioner and enables new ways of working. I think that we get a bit carried away with the idea that tools can't help support process and culture change. And at the moment, I think we are seeing some really interesting tooling being provided to help people become more effective.
Yeah, for sure. No, they do say to change culture, you want to change habits, and sometimes using different tools helps do that. So tools drive culture change. Would you go so far as say that? Or maybe great tools?
They can.
They can. I think it's, it's socio-technical, it's cyclical. The change can start anywhere.
But if you can make the right way the easy way, and that gets to some of what Charity was saying, then we're really moving forward. And I think that's actually, as an industry, like I'm really interested at the moment about the sort of the golden pathways. So how do you make the right thing the easy thing? So like how do you have constraints and guidelines so that the developers can be extremely productive and be in flow, but also understand the environment? It's well enough bounded that they can also be confident that if something does break, they can fix it. And
like everyone's comfortable making locally optimal decisions, but at scale, you have to start making globally optimal decisions sometimes. And the only way to really do that is to have a golden path that you support, that you put the organization's weight behind.
And whose responsibility is that to kind of see past the local optimizations and pull everything together?
I mean, it's all of us really, but I mean the way that I recommend is I have a blog post about this is just that, you pull together some of your senior folks and you make, you have like a council and there has to be a way of, constantly like recommending changes to the golden path that you've defined. There has to be a way of, cycling people in and out of the council, but, the software systems are always in flux, and you have to make agreements about how much you're willing to staff. Right. So if you're like, okay, our golden path is, Golang, Ubuntu, containers, whatever, et cetera, then, adding Rust to the mix requires, I think that whenever you're trying to add or replace something, it has to be an order of magnitude better than what you're trying to replace or supplement, or it's probably not worth it.
I was just sorry.
Go ahead.
Say, I think one of the a slightly different answer is I think that we really are seeing organizations move to much more of a product focus and a product management focus. Instead of having product owners, you begin to have that ownership up and down a stack where, in terms of like, I think the FT, some really interesting stuff going on there where like they're doing this thing of, we're gonna, if there is not, because we've got product owners, they have to know any bit of infrastructure that supports the applications that they're building. And so they're like, we're going to turn stuff off if nobody knows what it's for. Like, let's move to having more ownership. Awesome. And yeah, no, there's yeah, I think Anna Shipman wrote a really good blog post about that. And that's an organization like the FT that, it's been around a while. But it's doing a lot of these things that we're talking about. It's a really sophisticated IT organization now. And yeah, I think that product ownership is one of the other linked disciplines. Having a product rather than a project focus for IT helps you to become more effective with things like production excellence.
And thinking about like the CTO and their role in it, or maybe for the CTOs watching today, like what would you say to them? What's the advice for their role that they should play in all of this?
I've never met two CTOs that are the same, so that's a challenging question. I don't know. I think that one anti-pattern that I've seen a lot of is just the CTOs who are very prone to believing vendors when they're like, give us lots of money and we'll make it so that your people don't have to understand what's going on. Just like give me tens of billions of dollars and we'll give you a dashboard that tells you what the problem is. Your people won't have to, and that's just always going to be a lie. It's not, your people are not fungible. They're just as much a part of your socio-technical system as the services are. And our job should really be to make them more powerful at their jobs, not make them less and less necessary.
James, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think the role of CTO is up for grabs. I mean, one of the interesting things that I've been seeing is sort of field CTOs, get the CTO out with the customers and seeing, like, dealing with customer problems, and then, have that as a point of advocacy within the org for, serving those customers with better products. So yeah, I mean, I think that but if we're talking about, look, you're coming at this from a somewhat top-down perspective, yeah, I think as Charity said, it is, people matter, and make sure that you've got some people in the organization that are empowered to make the changes. That you've got them already. You just need to find and support them. I think that Adrian Cockcroft used to say, and obviously he's one of the great sort of rhetoricians in this industry, in fact, but he would give, as part of his talk, he would say, look, when I go out and talk to, like CTOs or whatever, and I'm, here I am, I'm like, Mr. Microservices, I'm like, Netflix, latterly, AWS, people would say, oh, how do you hire those people? How do you get those amazing people that work at Netflix and build these amazing applications? And he would say, oh, that's an easy one. I hired them from you. So the CTO's role is to understand the talent they have, I think, as well. It's not just a technology thing, like making sure it's not about, and maybe it's about hiring some new blood to drive some change, but also there are always change makers in any org that are just waiting to be unleashed and do things in new, cool ways. And so leaning into that a bit would be my advice for anybody.
And the CI/CD pipeline is a great place to start, because there's so many just like hundreds of thousands of wasted hours and pain there, just by making people wait to get their code live, and it like in that space lies death.
Love that.
I
So
think
you've got the people already, and in that space lies death. Love it. So for those teams, they're like, one of the things we hear is that there's just so much happening, and it does feel like we're in a bit of a software delivery renaissance. But at the same time, we've all got these different terms, and people will hear talks at CDCon, and it will be like, okay, DevOps and Agile and GitOps and DevSecOps and observability, progressive delivery, production excellence. There's just so much to contend with. So
we're all looking for ways to describe what we're experiencing. We're always looking for different metaphors for different things that we see click with people. It's rare that we sit here and just go, aha, this is a term that I have decided is important. And we're talking about something and we hear something resonate with people. And so we say it more. And so we hear it resonate with more people. And then other people start fleshing it out and filling it in. And then it becomes a thing. But and there are 10 times as many other terms that like never get lifted off and don't resonate with anyone, but there are just a lot of things that are sort of in flux and in the air right now. And it becomes a helpful way for people to like find their peers and collaborate, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, that's how I see it. I like it. I'm not like a tech language curmudgeon. I'm not like, we wrote the book 10 years ago and everything must have that name. I think it's there's some fashion in the industry. It is tribal. It's fun. One hopes that we like to learn new things. And yeah, describing things, a set of practices that you see is just a brilliant way to get other people to latch on. And also we spoke about the culture change. Okay, look, we've still got a long way to go in any of these areas, but without having a working language for that excited people, we're not going to make the changes. So I know it might seem a bit like, oh my God, why is there another term here? But I guarantee that there are a bunch of other people that, again, you could tap into as a resource that are profoundly excited by that thing that you're like, oh, what, why is it a new thing? There are a lot of people doing interesting work there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, James and Charity.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.